Hi friends! We are getting down there in our portal story writing. We are getting down to the falling action part. So we've done all this part, which is setting the scene, telling the character, introducing the problem, the rising action. We've had our conflict, we've had our major climax. That's the word I was looking for, not conflict. We've had our climax, and now we're starting to get towards closer to the end of our story. And so we're in what's called the falling action portion of our story. So, pardon me. When I start out, I haven't talked a lot in the morning yet when I do these. So our job for this part is to move the character toward the solution. So the solution to my story is that I'm going to return the mother of pearl to the mermaid people so that their queen can stop being so sad. We're going to decrease the tension. So all the things that you would be worrying about in the story or have questions about, or things that are really exciting, like Deadly the dragon is trying to attack me, we want to make sure that the reader feels comfortable, like Deadly the dragon's not going to continue to attack the main character. And we want to answer any questions and tie up loose ends. I don't know about you, but there are times when I've watched a movie or read a story and I'm left wondering, what happened at this part? Because they never answered the questions. And so this is the part where we answer those questions and make sure the reader is left feeling like things are tied up, things have been completed, and things are ready to end. So I know that sometimes I feel like this part takes forever with rereading the story, but I feel like you can't get the full spectrum of the story without reading the whole thing. And I hope that when you start writing every time that you're also reading your whole story. You're not just starting to write without checking back in with what you've done before. And as you reread your story, I would also expect that you are spending some time like crossing out words and putting better words in there, or adding quotation marks if there's talking, getting rid of those ands and buts that are the beginning of a story, and adding verbs that will have a deeper meaning to the story and add emotion and action and be really specific. Last week we talked about how you can say he went up the side of the mountain, or you can say he climbed up the side of the mountain. You can say the dragon ran after me, or the dragon stomped after me or stormed toward me. And so you can use words like that, and as you're reading you're like, oh, this is a better word. And sometimes taking a week away from your reading, so having a full week between when you have written and when you reread it, will help you to be able to see things better as a writer. I know that for me, when I'm writing, when I'm done, I'm done. I don't want to work with it anymore. My brain is done with it. And so when I check back in with it and I go, oh, this would be a better word here, my brain is more open to it. My body is more open to spending the muscle time to get that changed a little bit. And then I am not going to require you to do this for this time, and you're not required to turn it into me in this way, but I think that this is a great story that you could spend some time typing up, because these stories that I am reading, the ones that you have shown me, are absolutely incredible. And so you would probably, when you get to be a little bit older, love to have a copy of this. And another thing, Father's Day is coming up. I bet your dad would love to have a typed up copy that's beautifully illustrated for him to keep for Father's Day, or your grandpa, if you don't have a dad who's active in your life, or your mom, or whoever lives with you would love to have a copy of this story that is beautifully written and illustrated. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on mine, and I'm going to reread the whole thing to you. And then I'm going to read the part where it is the falling action, and we're going to point out the parts that I'm doing this for. All right. One day and by the way, the squirrels in my backyard are going crazy right now. Therefore, Freddy's going crazy, so you might see some action behind me today as we're working. One day my video game machine wouldn't turn on. I tried fixing it by checking the connections, and when I peeked behind the TV, there was a hole in the wall. I knew I shouldn't, but I reached into the hole and was sucked right into the magical portal. When I got to the other side, this is the incredible world I saw. Suddenly, I found myself on a mysterious island. I quickly looked behind myself, but the hole seemed to have disappeared. I decided I'd better get familiar with my surroundings since it looked like I wasn't going back home very soon. When I looked around, I saw a beach with crystal blue water lapping at the shores and tall palm trees heavy with coconuts standing high above them. Seagrasses rustled in the gentle breeze, and tropical flowers released their fragrances. The sun was shining bright in this golden, beautiful world. As I looked out in the sparkling water, I thought I saw a fin flip, and the sound of tinkling laughter rang in my ears. The island was beautiful, comfortable, and safe feeling. It felt like the kind of place where magical things happened and goodness reigned. Okay, so that was my setting. This next part is character. Excuse me. I was definitely curious about the laughter I heard, so I moved toward the edge of the water. As I stepped into the water, a change started to come over me. I still felt like the same inquisitive, optimistic girl inside, but I noticed my legs started to tingle as scales started to appear. I quickly hopped back out of the water and they went away. Cautiously, I dipped my toe back in the water, and again, purple, green, and turquoise blue scales started forming, running up my legs and ending at my waist. I went in deeper, and as I got up to my belly button, then my shoulders, my legs fused together, and I realized I was half fish, half human girl. I had gained the ability to change into a mermaid. I couldn't believe it. I turned into Sophia, the mermaid girl. As I swam back to the beach, the same thing happened in reverse, and my legs separated as I was able to walk again. I dove into the water with excitement, opened my eyes, and found that I could see and breathe with no problem at all. I liked this new place I found myself in and couldn't wait to explore the underwater world and beautiful island. Part 3 is when we introduce the problem. After I realized I was amphibious and could breathe in and out of water, I fearlessly dove in and began exploring the crystal clear water. I was in a large cove. The land curling around the water made the water a calm and warm, with an opening as far out that led to the ocean. I swam. Do you hear these birds? I swam down under the water, and looking in the kelp beds, I saw the flipping of fins that looked a lot like mine. As I swam closer and closer to the kelp, I noticed that it wasn't all seaweed. Some of what I thought was kelp was actually hair attached to real mermaids. I decided to swim even closer, slowly, to get a better look, and several mermaids and mermen darted away. Well, I didn't want to scare them. I also wanted them to understand that I was friendly, so I stopped and floated for a moment. I waved and smiled and noticed that while many of them had swum away, a few stayed close, curiously looking at me. One girl even swam a little bit closer to me. She looked back at the others as if asking them to stay close, then bravely came toward me. I smiled again and she returned my smile. I decided to try speaking and said hello, but it all came out like bubbles and squeaks. She pointed to the surface of the water, so we both swam up until our faces broke through and she burst into laughter as she took a breath of air. "Who are you? Where are you from?" she asked. "We have never seen you before." I told her my name was Sophia and all about how I had arrived and what happened when I walked into the water. As I told her about my experience, her face changed from curious to excited. "Do you mean to tell me that you can walk on the island as well as swim in the water like us?" I nodded. Other merfolk were coming to the surface as well, one by one, and quite a group of them were listening to our conversation. She swam over to them and they huddled up together. All I could hear were murmurs of excitement. She swam back to me. "We need you, Sophia. We had our mother of pearl stolen from us, our most sacred gem. Without it, our queen is crying and sad every day. Do you think you can cross the island and bring it back from Deadly the dragon?" My jaw dropped with surprise. I wasn't sure I could do what they were asking of me. Okay, this next part is rising action. So this is the part where 3 things happen that are exciting. So this is kind of the opposite of the falling action. After giving it a moment's thought, I realized that the reason I was probably sent to this land was because they needed me. As silly as it sounded, I was probably the chosen one, like you see in movies, and answered that yes, I would help them. The merfolk all cheered as I swam to the water's edge and started walking up the beach. I knew that dragons usually lived in caves, and that meant I should probably head toward the mountain in the dead center of the island. I was heading into the jungle when I heard a hissing noise. Snakes. I hated snakes. When I looked up, there was the biggest, fattest, longest snake I had ever seen staring at me right in the eyes. I froze and looked right back at him, feeling like I was becoming hypnotized. I started imagining and feeling like being snug in my bed when all of a sudden I realized I was being hypnotized. I forced my eyes away from the snake's eyes and realized that it had started to wrap itself around me and squeeze. I freed my hands and pushed the snake away, escaping just moments before that deadly snake had made me his lunch. Now I was running through the jungle. I forgot about being careful and almost ran into a soupy, watery swamp. I tried stepping on one stone, but as I put my weight on it, the stone sunk into the swamp, quickly disappearing. Looking around, I saw turtles swimming, huge tropical leaves, and jungle vines. Maybe I could make a boat. I quickly picked several of the largest leaves and tied them in a boat shape with the jungle vines. Then I lassoed several turtles and held on to them as I climbed into my leaf boat. Before I knew it, the turtles were pulling me across the swampy waters. On the other side, I'd untied them and set them free, thanking them for their help. Now I was at the base of a mountain. High above me, I could see a cave with smoke coming out of the hole. The mountain was steep and rocky, and I wasn't sure how to climb it. Just then I spied a big, strong mountain goat. I had taken a bit of coconut before I set out. Hey, be quiet. Goodness sakes. I had taken a bit of coconut before I set out on my quest, so I held it out to the mountain goat, hoping to lure it to me. It stopped and looked at me, then cautiously came toward me. Once it started eating from my hand, I petted it until it became friendly. In one swift move, I hopped on its back, and it started galloping and jumping up the mountain, trying to shake me off. I hung on for dear life as he continued higher and higher up in the mountain. When we were close enough to the cave, I hopped off his back, and he took off in the woods. Now that I was close to the cave, I needed to make a plan to get inside. So that was adding tension, adding tension, adding tension. And now we're at the climax. Oh my gosh, we're at the cave. I remembered reading somewhere that dragons like to sleep on top of their treasure, so I knew the mermaid's mother of pearl would be kept close to Dudley the dragon as he puffed smoke in his cave. That was another thing. This was obviously a fire-breathing dragon named Deadly. It didn't seem like many living creatures made it out of the cave alive. I reflected on how I used the jungle vines tied to the turtles to pull me across the swamp. I thought about how the goat had helped me climb the steep walls and how a snake had nearly hypnotized me. I quickly gathered some vines and tied them together, making a long rope. I tied one end to my waist and the other to a sturdy tree at the mouth of the cave that was near the cliff's edge. While I was gathering vines, I spied a snake, just like the one who'd almost hypnotized me, and without looking in its eyes, I dragged its writhing body to the edge of the cave. The snake slinked into the cave while I piled vines on top of me for camouflage. I watched the snake move toward a pile of gold and gems and saw the dragon dozing nearby. I scooted a little further out in the cave looking for the mother of pearl, all the while keeping my eyes on the snake and dragon situation. The snake reached Deadly and slithered up his neck. The dragon stirred and began to wake. I froze, and just then I spied it, the mother of pearl gem. See, this is getting really exciting. It was gleaming next to Dudley the dragon's right claw, inches away from his scorching, smoky breath. As the snake wound himself tighter around the dragon's neck, Dudley woke up to see the snake looking right into his eyes. Dudley froze, hypnotized. It was time to make my move. I dropped the vines I was hiding behind and dashed to the mother of pearl. I snatched it while Dudley continued to be under the snake's spell. As I was streaking toward the cave's opening, I heard a noise behind me. Dudley was struggling with the snake, pushing it away and glaring at me as I escaped with the mother of pearl. I flew to the edge of the cleft, and just as Dudley came bounding out of the cave, I leaped off the side, hanging on tight to the mother of pearl and the vine, hoping that they would hold me. The dragon roared at the edge of the cave. Fire singed the treetops, but I had made it safely out of his reach, landing safely and luckily in a soft pile of leaves under a thick canopy of trees and bush leaves. As I lay still as a mouse, hardly daring to breathe, while Dudley stormed above me, trying to find his target. All right, part 5. So, the most exciting part of the story just happened, and now I need to make sure that the reader is feeling safe, like Dudley's not going to find me, like I'm going to be able to make it back, like I'm going to get back across that swamp, and like I'm not going to get hypnotized by the snake as I go through the jungle. So those are my jobs right now, is to bring down the tension, get closer to the mermaids, and return their mother of pearl to them. And this is a shorter part, so we just got through the hardest parts of the whole story. I untied the vine from around my waist, and when Dudley had stomped to the other side of the cliff, I scrambled out from under the bushes and around the corner of the cliff, out of his sight. I stopped for a moment to catch my breath and make sure the mother of pearl was still with me. Then I tucked it safely in my pocket. So now we know that I got away from Dudley the dragon just fine. and now I need to get out and get closer to the beach. Once again, I sailed across the swamp using my leaf boat and turtles I had used earlier and hustled through the jungle, avoiding looking at the hypnotizing snakes that I could recognize by now. So now I can use my schema. I had learned what snakes were going to be hypnotizing me, and I reused my little boat that I had from the turtles and the same trick that I'd used before to get back out of there. I found myself back at the same beach I started at when I entered this world. But I'm also worried as a reader that Deadly the dragon may have gotten off of his cliff and be looking for me. So I may still need to fight him. So I need to answer that question for my readers and make sure that they know I am safe. I looked back at the rocky cliffs that I now knew had a dragon in them and could barely see the puffs of smoke coming from the distant cave. Thankfully, Deadly had given up on trying to find me and appeared to have gone back in the cave to protect the rest of his treasure. So now we know that I am safe, that he gave up, that he was kind of a wimpy dragon when it came down to it because he didn't try very hard to get me. He stomped around at the edge of the cliff and then went back in and went back to sleep. Once again, the island felt safe and friendly. So now I'm telling my readers that I'm back into a safe space. I've answered all the questions. I've told them how I got back to the beach, and I made the tension fall dramatically. In the distance, on the horizon of the water, I could see the mermaids splashing and playing. It was time to return their treasure to them. So you can see that I got off that mountain, got away from Deadly, and now I'm about to end my story. Next week, we are going to write the conclusion where I'm going to give my treasure back to the mermaids, and then magically, I'm going to be sucked out of their land, back through the portal, and I'm going to find myself back in my living room where the video game was. So we're about to wrap it up, friends. So go ahead and write your falling action. Send me a picture of it because I do want to see it, or send me, share your document with me through your Chromebook, and I will offer you any advice that you need. But this is pretty basic, pretty easy, and it should be a pretty quick end to your story. And once again, I encourage you to type it up and make it a document that you can keep for a really long time. Have a great Wednesday. I love you as always, and it was fun sharing this time with you. See you soon.